Based off expectations in the preseason and before the 2024 season started, where does your AFL team's club season rank among this tier list? So this is not simply a reordering of the AFL ladder. This is more a reflection of did they over or under exceed expectations. But first of all, this is a boring tier list. Let's change it up. And now we've got the tier list from absolutely elite being a great season for them. Fans cheering like okay, but is it okay? Maybe add a comment there. We've got fans crying and then relegate to VFL. So we're gonna just go from the order that they give it us in here. Adelaide Football Club first. Now, Adelaide had a really poor season. I think what I am gonna take into context for a lot of these teams is injuries and other little contextual factors, but the reality is, even though Adelaide had a lot of injuries, it was still a poor season. I think finishing fourth last is just absolutely not acceptable. In any spirit, like they should have made the 8 last year in 2023, and they just missed out because of the incorrect Ben Keys decision. And everyone thought, including myself and a lot of people, they are young and they're just going to get better and they're going to make the 8. And they took a backward step. They did have some good telltale signs, but I think all in all, it's been one of the bottom 2 categories here. Fans were crying, but do they deserve to be relegated to the VFL? I think they do. I think it was a horrific season. If you think about it, I think I had them in 7th place or 6th place. 4th last is absolutely not acceptable. Brisbane, I mean, this is the easiest one. They won the flag. There you go. Like, we don't really need to talk about that much else. Great season for them. Fans of whoever wins the flag, obviously it's a great season. The Western Bulldogs now, this is a really tough one because I thought they had a really good season, but they're just unfortunate. They came up against Hawthorn, a great informed team in the finals. If they came up against the likes of Carlton, might have been a different story, but the reality is, made finals, didn't win a final. Is that what people expected? The Dogs were always a hard one to predict in the preseason predictions. Like, I think around the 8, just outside was where they would finish, and they did. I think it's a mid-table. It's a mid-table. They won that final, it's fans cheering, and fans were cheering, but the reality is, for a crazily talented list to not win a final, is that acceptable? Probably not. Carlton now, and now for most of the season, Carlton were looking like an absolutely elite team. They were top 2. From memory, it was Sydney and Carlton as the top 2 teams, and it was kind of like, well, who's going to finish 3rd and 4th? And then injuries, Mackay, Kerno, the injuries, even the docket at the start of the season, but injuries towards the end of the season absolutely fucked them. Now, in terms of the season in its entirety, I think most of it was fans cheering. The end was just fans absolutely crying. I think overall it's a fans crying season. I think they had the worst type of injuries towards the end. When you have injuries to so many players in similar positions, that's when it gets really bad. And it's not relegate to VFL because they still made finals, but I think it's close to it. Especially given the expectation they should have finished I had them for the flag, for fuck's sake. So only because I think the injuries were maybe worse at a time, and they did have such a good season in the first half. That's why they're not relegate VFL. Collingwood's an interesting one as well. I think they had a worse season than Carlton, both in terms of the fact, you won the flag last year to not make the 8. I think it has to be relegated to VFL. But then you tell me, well, the injuries for Collingwood were so bad. So bad, like enormously bad. But the reality is, a premiership team with a premiership list, they have the depth, and I think there were just some games there where it didn't quite look like there was fight. If you had to compare Carlton and Collingwood fans this season, I think the majority of the season, Carlton were happy until the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. And then Collingwood, just throughout the season, they've never really been a guaranteed top 4 team. It never looked throughout the season they were going to win the flag again. And even though the injuries were there, I think they're just sneaking into relegate to VFL. Fremantle now, and for a team that, once again, synonymous with Carlton, should have made finals. Injuries to key players fucked them towards the end. I think less expectations than Carlton. I think they make the 8. It's a fans cheering type of season, but I think because they don't make it, they just slip down to like, okay, but is it okay? Like, the season's good, but it was bad. Like, where does it sit? I don't know. West Coast Eagles now, and well, this is going to cause controversy. 3rd last, obviously, in the ladder, which indicates a poor season, but I think this was a fans cheering season. I had them finishing dead last in my predictions. A lot of people had them dead last. I think they were clearly above North and Richmond, just maybe. Maybe not clearly, but I thought they were. And I just think the excitement of Harley Reid, some of the great wins throughout the season, I think all in all, the fans were cheering. The fans are not cheering for Essendon though, as it was just another failed season. Now, this is a really interesting one because, like, I predicted them to finish exactly where they did. I got it bang on, I think it was 11th or something, but whatever the prediction was, I nailed it in my preseason predictions. And I believe where they finished was the same as where they did in 2023, so they haven't strictly regressed, but I just think it's just disappointing. It's a disappointing season, it's a bit of a nothing season, but the reality is, it's similar to Carlton where Essendon were top 4 for so long, looking likely, and the slip, the faller, is just crazy. And for that reason, they go on fans crying. For Geelong now, they had an absolutely elite season. To be so close to a grand final, in fact, 2 minutes away from a grand final, for a team that so many, including myself, yes, I've got an agenda against Geelong, I wrote them off, and I was wrong. I was completely and utterly wrong about this team. So, you know what the most impressive part is? You've got these old players retiring, you know, Hawkins was done, Rowan's done, Selwa's already retired, Tui's gonna retire, or has, and they find these gems in these VFL teams, these absolute gems, Manor, some others that I can't quite think at the top of my head, and they just know how to pick the right plays. And Chris Scott, credit to him because he's been coaching for over like 14 odd seasons now, you must be getting tired, but he still does so well. And even though they didn't win anything, I think the fans were cheering throughout the whole time, and I think it was an absolutely elite season. And it's a stark reminder that if you've got a solid higher up, if your hierarchy, the higher ups are quite strong and in line with the same vision, and the coach is good as well, you're fine. Like, look at the teams that are struggling. Because the coach is questionable, the higher ups are questionable, there's a bit of dodginess going on. Great season for Geelong. For the Suns, this is probably one of the more interesting ones to debate. Yeah, I think compared to my expectations, they had a pretty good season. Some people had them into the 8, so they would have let those people down. I'm gonna balance it out to pretty, like, okay, but is it okay? They had a good season, and I think in the grand scheme of things, I really want to put them in fans cheering, but should they go in fans? Well, we might come back to that because I'm not entirely sure I'm happy with that yet. The Giants now, and going out in straight sets will never leave you with a happy taste as a fan. That's a weird fucking analogy, but that fans would be pretty sad about a team that looked so likely to, maybe not likely, but I thought they were guaranteed to have a grand finals berth, but they didn't. And to be dominating for so many parts of the games against Brisbane and Sydney, and to not have come away with a victory for either of those finals, it's disappointing. I think generally they had a really good season. The end probably, like, these are all contextual. These are the categories. Like, fans were crying, but fans were cheering throughout most of it. I feel weird putting it in this, like, okay, but is it okay? But the reality is, going out in straight sets means it's a bit of a poor season. It could be fans crying. We'll come back to that one as well. We'll maybe change that. Hawthorn, start of the season was awful. Mid-season, okay. End season, elite. And I think generally over the course of a season, it's been an absolutely elite season. It has been a season of growth, of excitement. And I think next year they are posed to do amazing things. I could easily see them winning the flag next year. Absolutely easily. But that's a different video. We're not going to get into that. Amazing season. Won a final as well. Hockball is here to stay. Melbourne, awful season. In fact, I think probably one of the worst seasons from this whole list. Might be the worst. We'll get to that. There's some shitty teams coming up. But to go from 2 seasons in a row where they were top 4, I believe. But, you know, 2021, they win the... 2021 they win the flag. 22 straight sets, I think, or 23 straight sets. Look, 2024, I expected them to do all right. Like, yeah, I expected them to do good, like decent, like just make top 8 or maybe just miss out. But to finish 5th last is not acceptable. The Petrarca injury obviously fucked them, but the off-season, the off-field, the season as a whole, not just on the field, is diabolical. And for that, we chuck it and relegate to VFL. North Melbourne now. Jeez. This is an interesting one because second last, with the worst percentage in the league. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, North Melbourne have better talent than West Coast and Richmond, okay? They have better talent than both of them. I can list some of the names they have, but even the midfield alone, should be enough to get you more than 2 wins. I think it's been an awful season. It's been a really bad season. And why don't we do Richmond whilst we're at it? Because Richmond are pretty similar. Richmond, Richmond are a VFL team right now. And last season, in 2024, we were shite. And our team probably would barely beat any VFL team. But contextually, Richmond had more injuries. We've got a worse list. And I think there was less expectations on us to improve. And we had a better percentage than North. Call me biased, but I think the 4 below us had a worse season contextually compared to expectations. And yeah, but I could easily see why you put Richmond in the bottom. Put Adelaide now, it's been a very, very good season for them. I thought they did fantastically. There's a bit of controversy towards the end with Ken Hinckley's job in question, or under question, but Josh Carl might take over there. Anyway, Stuart, you might as well. I think it's been a really good season. I did not think they were going to do this well. To finish, I think, second is phenomenal. And although they didn't win anything, they did win a final, which is something I think that's been a really good season. And we'll move on to St Kilda now, who had, and I think St Kilda, the unfortunate part about them is we tend to remember the first 3 quarters of the season, but towards the end of the season, St Kilda were dominant. They were fantastic. A few slip-ups here and there, obviously, but for the majority of that latter end of the season, they were fantastic. And it's unfortunate because I don't think people really recognise how good they were, and if that transfers to next season, they could well do really well. Ultimately, it's been a really poor season for them. I think that is definitely common knowledge, but I think it could have been a lot worse than what it was. And finally, Sydney, I mean, it's been an absolutely elite season for them. The unfortunate part is they didn't win the flag. So it's hard to, where do you put Sydney, right? Because I had them finishing 3rd. I was one of the few who had them as flag favourites. So in my expectations, I guess they just lived up to it, but to others they exceeded. I think overall, it's been a pretty elite season. Now, before I finish off, it was the Suns and this kind of category. Can I move anyone up into fans cheering? None of these teams won a final. I think in terms of expectations, if I'm being honest with myself, Fremantle and the Suns did the best. They did the best in terms of the expectations. And if I'm going to put anyone in there, I will probably put the Suns. I think the Suns had a decent season and I'm going to promote them to fans cheering. But this tier list you see here is the final tier list of your club's 2024 season. This will cause outrage, but let me know where you think your club should be, and thank you for watching.